Tonight's big stories. The International Criminal Court has decided that the probe into Duterte's drug war will resume, throwing out the government's last-ditch appeal to junk the investigation.
Speaking of, former President Duterte flew to Beijing to meet with his old friend, Chinese President Xi Jinping. Xi asked Duterte to continue promoting cooperation between the two countries.
And President Bongbong Marcos signs into law the controversial Maharlika Investment Fund bill, creating the country's first sovereign wealth fund. Welcome to the show. I'm Regina.
I'm Gretchen.
And I'm Shawn.
Straight on to the big news of the day, and the International Criminal Court will proceed with investigating the Duterte administration's bloody war on drugs. This afternoon, the court rejected the Philippine government's appeal to stop the investigation. Of course, it was a highly anticipated decision, but a lot had happened before we even got here. So let's take a look back.
Right, if you can recall, prosecutors requested for this probe that was granted in January 26. So a week later, in early February, nag-appeal naman ang Philippine government against this authorization. The Philippines requested for suspension while the tribunal hears its main appeal. Fast forward to March, the ICC rejected rejected the request, actually, saying that the Philippines failed to provide persuasive or convincing reasons to suspend the drug war investigation. And now here we are, rejected na naman, so mukhang tuloy na talaga.
It looks like this is a final and executory decision on the appeal.
So wala na.
But the question is, what
So
can
there's no
happen
longer
after
any
that,
more recourse.
Right?
There's no recourse, but then the Philippines, or the Philippine government, has also steadfastly said it will not be cooperating. So it's interesting to see how this will develop.
Because it withdrew the country from the ICC
The Rome
membership
Statute.
in 2019.
That's right.
But the argument of the ICC is that they can still investigate
When we were a member.
correct
Yes.
cases that happened before we withdrew
So until
from the Rome Statute.
2019.
Correct. So
But the question is, what can happen next? We know that this requires the participation of the Philippine government for it to actually happen. And that is the question on everyone's mind. And here is what we know. Prosecutor Karim Khan may start gathering evidence as of now and seek issuance of arrest warrants or summonses against suspects in the drug war where 6,200 reportedly died. These include former President Rodrigo Duterte and former PNP chief and now Senator Bato de la Rosa. However, arrests seem unlikely as the Marcos administration says it will not cooperate with the ICC's investigation. But should there be any arrests, the suspects will undergo pre-trial proceedings before the ICC. These are called confirmation of charges, where the ICC judge will review the evidence and determine whether there are substantial grounds to believe that the suspects are responsible for the crimes. If charges are confirmed, the ICC will schedule a trial date. So, mention din natin, no, parang this is the first time, I think, that nabanggit yung pangalan ni Vice President Sara Duterte dun sa sinabit na papers along with Senator Bato de la Rosa and Senator Bongo.
that's right. That's according to a Vera Files report. Although we don't know exactly if she's being outright implicated in the
Baka
investigation.
interviewin lang, di ba? Affidavit, ganyan.
Correct.
Pero kanina, no, we were able to, this afternoon, we spoke to Attorney Harry Roque. And we asked President Duterte, no, about this decision being handed down. Sabi niya, I believe he can't be bothered.
Which was his stand even before, I guess.
Exactly.
Well, here in the Philippines, so far, if they say they're not compliant with the ICC, nothing can happen. But if they go abroad, if the people implicated in the case will go abroad, syempre doon, kasi
Baka iba yung tingin ng
ICC,
ibang gobyerno.
has within its chamber 193 countries that cooperate with it.
Well, you know who will be affected by that and who will be offended by that? Former PNP chief and current Senator Bato de la Rosa, who of course at one point was leading the controversial drug war.
And was refused, I think, a U.S. visa. Now, guys, if the Philippine government refuses to cooperate, ICC Assistant to Counsel Cristina Conti says that there are other ways to pursue the investigation. Let's hear it from her.
private persons can easily provide the information that the government does not want to provide. Other departments or branches of government, hindi ko alam, no? Pero kung Supreme Court ang tatanungin dun sa Pangilinan versus Cayetano case, sila na mismo ang nagsabing, kahit pa umalis na tayo, meron pa rin tayong obligation. Kahit pa ayaw niya nang sumali sa ICC, may nangyari na at yun ang dapat may pananagutan.
And as expected, Human Rights Watch welcomed the decision, saying that it marks the next step toward justice for victims of drug war killings and their families. The group's Asia director, Brian Lau, also challenged the Marcos administration to stand by its commitment to human rights by following through on its international legal obligation to cooperate with the ICC investigation. But there is a political cost to it if the Marcos administration gives investigators free rein. Political analyst Richard Haydarian weighs in. Let's listen to this.
Marcos Jr. is an ally of the Dutertes. At least that's still the position until today. If pumayag ang Marcos administration na mag-push ahead ang ICC dun sa kanilang investigation and potentially with prosecution and potentially even more down the road, imprisonment of some of the former officials, then that could lead to a hindi lang dissolution of the unit team. That could lead to the transformation of the Dutertes into the main opposition group against Marcos.
Now let's get more on Senator Bato de la Rosa's reaction from our reporter Marlene Alcaide. Marlene, what do you have?
Yes, Reg, as you heard, De La Rosa said he is unbothered by the ICC's ruling. He even challenged the ICC to come and find him. De La Rosa says that he is confident that the Marcos administration will protect him, but if not, the former PNP chief says he is capable of protecting himself. De La Rosa adds that he will not hide if ever the ICC releases a warrant against him and that he will continue his job as a senator. For his part, Senate President Mig Zubiri has also assured Senator Bato that he will be provided protection. Zubiri says De La Rosa will only be surrendered for arrest if the warrant comes from a Philippine court. Reg?
Thanks for that update, Marlene. While all of this was going on, former President Rodrigo Duterte was able to squeeze in a trip to China to meet his old friend Chinese President Xi Jinping. The meeting took place Monday in Beijing at the Diaoyutai State Guest House. Reports said that Chinese State Councilor Wang Yi and members of the Chinese Foreign Ministry were also present at that meeting.
Now, this meeting was a reunion of sorts for the two. Recall that Duterte made multiple visits to China during his term. The Chinese Foreign Ministry also said that it welcomes Duterte's, quote, strategic choice to improve relations with China during his presidency, end quote. The Foreign Ministry also said that China values its relations with the Philippines and is ready to sustain this growth in bilateral ties.
Well, a big takeaway from this meeting is that Xi Jinping hoping for Duterte to continue playing an important role in China-Philippine relations. The Foreign Affairs Department says it has no official information on Duterte's visit to China. President Marcos, however, said he knew about it and he hopes the meeting will bear fruit for the Philippines.
Alam ko naman na pupunta siya at magkaibigan sila. I welcome any new lines of communication. If that is President PRRD, then good. Hindi importante sa akin kung sino, kung ano, basta may makausap sila, baka makatulong eh.
At least one analyst, though, sees a possible conflict with Duterte's visit to China. Strat-based ADR President Dindo Manhit says the move undermines President Marcos.
This undermines President Bongbong Marcos' policy. And second, he was doing it a week after the celebration or July 12th, where China issued a statement, again, strong statement against our arbitral victory. So why is a former president visiting? What does he project? That he projects that he's close to China, the greatest security threat to the Philippines at this moment.
Here to help us understand the political dynamic at play here, we have former National Security Advisor, Professor Clarita Carlos. Professor Carlos, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Hi, good evening to all three of you.
Professor, you heard our reporting about the former president's visit to Beijing. Of course, this is coming on the back of a very eventful week. We had the arbitral ruling anniversary. We now also have the ICC decision. How did you read into all of this?
Well, okay. This will require more time than what the show would give me, but let's take it one at a time. I'm listening to the commentaries of some of your resource persons in regard to the ICC. Harry Roque, who is my student, a very fine scholar, is correct. The ICC, imperatives can only kick in if we are doing nothing in our local courts, and that is not true. This is not to protect or to support the alleged EJK during the first 2 years of Duterte's time after we withdrew from the ICC. This is to indicate that indeed on the ground, things are moving in terms of filing cases against people identified with this extrajudicial killing. Please note, countries who are not members of the ICC, like the United States, have committed egregious crimes against humanity. Is anyone asking them to account for their acts? This is not, again, anti-US. I'm a scholar and I'm looking at it from all even bases. So, if you are not a member of the ICC, pwede ka na magpatay ng mga tao ng genocide. Hindi ka hahabulin ng ICC kasi hindi ka member eh. Diba? Okay. Sino mga hinahabol nila? Hinahabol nila yung mga taga-Africa. Yung hinahabol nila yung mga developing countries na hindi makadefend ang sarili nila. So, ang Amerika nga sabi sa kanila, isa sa inyo pumasok dito sa Amerika, hindi kayo makakapasok kasi may immigration kami. So, let's say the same thing, no? Okay. May ginagawa kami dito sa domestic sphere. So, hindi kayo makapasok dito kasi wala kayong visa. Yan na kayo sa airport.
Yeah,
if it comes to that.
Professor, that's fair. Pero if I could just have you comment first on the meeting between former President Duterte and President Xi Jinping, no? Kasi he is a former state of head, and is it usual for him to be, received at the state guest house in China?
Well, if you're a political scientist, you will read so many things about that. Did you see their body language? Xi Jinping palagi nakangiti. Nakita mo ba si Xi Jinping meeting with other political leaders? Palaging suplado yan, may smirk. Tulad ko, palaging may smirk sa face niya. Yun ang default niya eh. Okay, but remember, kasaysayan, di ba? Ang ganda ng istorya nila from 2016 to 2022. And maganda yung sinabi ni President Bongbong na alam niyang pupunta si Duterte doon. I'm sure Duterte had the decency to tell Bongbong, ay punta ako sa China ha. Okay, meron tinatawag sa international law, good offices. Good offices, gumit na ka, be an interlocutor between two countries who are not talking to each other. And I suspect, my hunch is that he's there as an interlocutor because of the increasing tension between Philippines and China for reasons which all of us already know. That said, if you have a sinister mind, you will think other things, isn't it? And yung sinabi nga ng isang resource person yun, si Manhit, na ina-undermine niya yung present administration. I don't think so. With all due respect, I disagree with him. Any effort for us not to go to war, for us not to be, to have our legs pulled into the war of the United States in regard to Taiwan is good. So I salute President Duterte for going to Xi Jinping. Nakita niyo yung component niya sa kapaligid niya? Si Wang Yi. You know, Wang Yi met with me. Si Wang Yi kasi is the top foreign policy minister yan. Nasa Politburo siya ngayon. When I met with Wang Yi, ang ganda ng usapan namin. More than 1 hour kami nag-meet dito nung NSA ako. And this is where we should go. Let us move away from the conflict on territory and sovereignty and let us talk functional cooperation. This is one of my memoranda to Bongbong Marcos before I resigned as NSA.
Well, Professor, what leverage do you think can we get from this meeting? Sabi nga po ni President Marcos, kahit papano, sana may maayos, meron tayong makuha dito. Then doesn't this run contrary to the statements of the President in the past months? when it comes to the West Philippine Sea?
Well, as a matter of fact, it is in sync with what he declared at the time of his inauguration, where he said China is our neighbor, our partner, and we're going to flesh that out. Unfortunately, things did not pan out a week after he visited China, which was the first week of January, and the articulation of their leadership, the leadership Xi Jinping, and what they were doing on the ground, they did not come together. So every effort for us, these two countries, to make more robust our relationship is a positive move. So let us not diminish the visit of Duterte.
All right, we're gonna have to leave that there for now. Thank you so much for joining us, former National Security Advisor Clarita Carlos.
Well, a quick break, but up next, what can we expect now that the Maharlika Investment Fund has been signed into law? The answer to that when we return. Keep it here on One News. You're watching the big story here on One News. Well, this came before the SONA on Monday. It's official. The Philippines now has a sovereign wealth fund. President Marcos signed the controversial Maharlika bill into law despite staunch criticism from lawmakers and economists, including a consortium of UP's top economic experts. The Maharlika Fund is the first of its kind in the Philippines, and its goal is to park state funds into all sorts of investment instruments to help fund priority programs. The final copy that got signed into law states that the initial capital of 75 billion pesos will come from Land Bank and the Development Bank of the Philippines. BSP dividends will also be used for the first 2 years of the fund. A copy of the newly signed law has yet to be released, but a briefer handed out to Palace reporters state that Finance Secretary Ben Jokno will sit as chairperson of the MIF board. Now, this runs counter to assurances made by President Marcos that the fund will be run by financial experts. Marcos went on to clarify that Jokno will serve as part of the board but will not have a hand in managing the fund.
The devil is in the details, as the saying goes. So now that it's a law, when do we get a hold of its implementing rules and regulations? Julie Baiza is here for some updates. Julie, what should we expect from here on out?
Reg, the Finance Department says they're in the final phase of crafting the IRR for the Maharlika Fund. They're hoping to have it done by September. While it's too early to talk about investment returns, Senate President Mig Zubiri admits it could take some time before we reap the benefits. Minority senators, on the other hand, are hoping to have the MIF law questioned before the Supreme Court. The National Union of People's Lawyers, along with the Makabayan Bloc, are already looking into legal actions available. Zubiri is confident, though, that the MIF law will be able to stand scrutiny from the High Court. Reg?
Thanks for that update, Julie Baiza.
So now that it's signed into law, I guess this opens the floodgates for all sorts of complaints. The question is, where will these complaints be lodged at? I guess the Supreme Court is, of course, one avenue. But even lawmakers are saying this should be corrected at the legislative level and not at the judiciary.
Because the Supreme Court, sabi nga ni Ed Salagman, do not involve themselves in whether a passed law is
wise.
appropriate,
Yeah,
is wise. The wisdom of any law.
But let's give them the benefit of the doubt, right? I mean, it could be a runaway success. Who knows, right?
Although meron pa
that's
ring
true.
loophole Meron din kasi, di ba, meron pang, tawag dito, meron silang kinorek.
Oo,
Yes,
yung
it's a
tampering
bill.
issue.
Last minute, that could be questioned in the
Yeah.
Supreme Court if somebody decides to pursue that.
Well,
My question, though, is with everything that's already on Finance Secretary Benjokno's plate, I mean, how could he take this on as well? Ang dami na
I
niyang-
think this is
I mean,
part
there's
of his
so
pet
much.
project. He has
It
been the
is, it
steward
is.
of this from the beginning. So it would also be super weird if he dropped out of it right now and let go, right?
Meron din naman nagsasabi na
Natutulog
parang
pa ba siya?
hinayaan na lang daw mga lawmakers kasi
Yes.
kumbaga parang it has the president's fingerprints all over it.
Correct.
So
Remember-
if it is a success or it fails, it's
It's on him.
We
Yes,
we
on
went
the
from
president.
we went from first mention publicly to law in less than a year. That's record speed in the Philippine context. I just wanted to.
Well, I'm
point out.
excited to hear what the president has to say about that on Monday.
On Monday, on his sauna. Okay, but before that, we have progressive group Bayan promising a bigger protest on the day of President Marcos's second sauna or State of the Nation address. Bayan Secretary General Mong Palatino said that more people are angry, so they are expecting thousands to turn up. Progressive groups actually held their so-called People's Sauna today, where Ibon Foundation slammed the failure of President Marcos to improve the lives of Filipinos. The group says no less than 18 or 19 million Filipino families are currently experiencing hardship. Ibon also pointed out that despite the decrease in the country's unemployment rate, the jobs that are being offered are of low quality. It also said that the 40 peso increase in the minimum wage here in Metro Manila clearly is not enough given the elevated inflation rate.
Kahit bumabagal ang inflation, hindi ibig sabihin mas mura ng presyo ng bilihin. Ang sinasabi lang, mas mabagal ang pagtaas ng presyo ng bilihin. Habang bumabagsak ang kalidad ng trabaho, habang bumabagsak ang kita ng mga pamilya, netong epekto, kahirapan sa bansa.
Other groups also called on the Marcos administration to do more, with one issue lingering from last year's elections. Let's get the story now from Shaila Francisco. Shaila, what do you have?
Reg, that's right. During the People's Sauna organized by different progressive groups, former DICT Chief Eliseo Rio Jr. stated that the administration should address doubts that have come to light in last year's elections. This comes after their discovery that Smartmatic used a virtual private network or VPN unknown to the public. They argued that the transmission of election returns should be direct from the vote counting machines to Comelec servers without any intermediaries. According to the IT experts, he says this is already equivalent to a cyber attack, hence the need for the administration to explain it to prevent the election results from being questioned. Reg?
Thanks for that update, Shaila Francisco.
After this quick break, the government is readying a 2.5 billion peso fuel subsidy for PUV drivers next year, but only for those who have taken part in the modernization program. More on that when we return. Keep it here. You're still watching the big story here on One News.
Preparations are underway for a new Ayuda program for all public vehicle drivers. But there's a catch. Starting next year, only members of cooperatives will be eligible for subsidies. The Transportation Department has allocated 2.5 billion pesos for the fuel subsidy for all public utility vehicles, including tricycle drivers. However, the LTFRB said it plans to release a policy that only drivers with modern jeepneys will be given fuel subsidies. This is in line with the government's December 31 deadline for jeepney drivers to form or join cooperatives.
Pag hindi ka naman nag-consolidate by December 31, hindi ka na rin mabibigyan ng iyong prangkisa, di ba? So, bakit pa namin kayo bibigyan ng fuel subsidy kung wala ka na rin prangkisa? Saan mo gagamitin yung fuel subsidy na yan?
Meanwhile, motorists today face another round of oil price hikes, with gasoline going up by 1 peso and 90 centavos per liter and diesel by over 2 pesos per liter. Kerosene is up by 1 peso and 80 centavos a liter.
Now, before we go, time for our big picture tonight. So, not everyone will be getting to see this in real life. And what you are seeing, this is the Electronic Benefit Transfer, or EBT card, that was given to individuals during the pilot run, or the launch of the pilot run of the DSWD's food stamp program earlier today. So this card will have load with food credit, or for food credits or load amounting to 3,000 pesos per month to purchase a select list of food commodities from DSWD registered or accredited retailers. The pilot implementation of the program will be conducted from July to December of this year, with the national implementation scheduled for next year. The DSWD says that it intends to reach out to 1 million food-poor Filipino families by 2026.
Kanina, tinitingnan namin yan eh. Yung 3,000 pesos nakahati pala yan, may breakdown. So, 1.5 goes to carbohydrate-rich food. Na parang...
So rice,
pasta.
pasta.
Tapos parang may certain amount
for
to protein.
protein.
Parang may ganun eh.
Tapos may fruits and
That's
veggies.
smart.
Oo, pero may
So, it's a
kapalit
balanced
to.
diet.
Oo, may kapalit to. Kailangan mag-training sila with TESDA.
Actually,
Testa
okay.
At 10.
Who needs a new logo?
Oh,
Same Testa.
also needs a new logo.
Baka pwede manggaling sa kanila yung bagong logo. May 10,000 pesos
There's
cash
a logo making contest by Testa. We're not joking, right?
Yeah, it is.
They
Oo,
posted about
10,000 pesos yung premyo nun.
Alright. Pero also for now, no, parang sa Kadiwa stores pa lang yata valid itong EBT card. I think probably they're
Other
still fixing
DSWD
partnerships.
partner stores.
Yeah.
Well, it's still, in its dry run. 3,000 families, I believe. So, more than... next year we'll be seeing that. Pero it also made it in time for Monday.
Yes. Ang galing nga kasi ang bilis. No, it's so fast, right? We just started talking
Political
about
will, ano?
And hoping that continues on. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for the show tonight.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in and good night.